and there's a bright future for Kaziranga.
We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Thousands more flee northern Gaza for south. Israel's military says Hamas has lost control in north of Gaza. Essential medical supplies and medicine reach in Gaza City. Second delivery of vital aid to the hospital since the conflict begins. World leaders to meet in Paris to coordinate aid and help for Gazans. Maritime corridor, floating hospitals in focus at the conference. In sports, New Zealand to take on Sri Lanka in a do-or-die Cricket World Cup encounter. And Real Madrid beyond Munich, Inter Milan and Real Sociedad all qualified for the last 16 of the Champions League. Moving on, as the humanitarian situation worsens in Gaza, civilians fled from their homes carrying what little of their belongings they could in their hands. Israel launched a ground offensive operation against Hamas's terror on the edges of Al-Shati refugee camp in northern Gaza, forcing its residents to relocate to south on Wednesday. Furthermore, Palestinian media also reported clashes between terrorist and Israeli forces at the refugee camp in Gaza City. The Palestinian media also claimed that Hamas's armed wing, the Izzad-Din al-Qassam brigades, had destroyed an Israeli tank in the Palestinian enclave. Also, Israel's military spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said that Hamas is losing its grip from northern Gaza as residents flee to the south.
We saw 50,000 Gazans move from the northern Gaza Strip to the south. They are moving because they understand that Hamas has lost control in the north and that the south is safer. There is no ceasefire. We are at war with Hamas. The public under Hamas is fleeing south because they understand that Hamas is using them as human shields. There are humanitarian pauses. We are not at war with the population of Gaza. We are at war with Hamas, who is holding our people hostage.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dismissed false rumors after reports that a proposal to release 12 hostages in exchange for a 3-day humanitarian pause is under discussion. Talking to media, Netanyahu reiterated that there will be no ceasefire without the release of hostages. He also issued a rare condemnation of West Bank settler violence. Netanyahu emphasized that Jewish extremists who attack Palestinians in the West Bank represent a small fraction of the overall Israeli population.
There will be no ceasefire without the release of our hostages. Anything else is futile. There is a tiny handful of people who do not represent this public, who take the law into their own hands. We are not prepared to tolerate it. We are not about to accept it. We will act against it in every way. This causes serious international damage to the state of Israel, and it does not represent the public. I condemn it, and we will act against it. And I know I represent all the people sitting here, the heads of the settlements in Judea and Samaria, and the people who settle in Judea and Samaria. Thank you very much.
Well, also, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met his Dutch counterpart Mark Rutte on Wednesday at his office in Jerusalem. According to the Israel's government press office, Netanyahu thanked Rutte for his friendship and support that he's helping Israel during the time of war. This is Rutte's second visit to Israel since the beginning Israel-Hamas conflict. And as the Israel-Hamas conflict rages on, the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt remained closed on Wednesday. The U.S. officials informed media that the crossing was shut due to an unspecified security circumstance. They further said that they are in continuous contact with Egypt and Israel to get it reopened. The crossing acts as a crucial opening to let aid into Gaza and evacuations of foreign passport holders amidst the ongoing conflict.
I'm just not going to parse into the specifics of the parameters, as our understanding is that its closure was because of a certain security circumstance. So our expectation is that once that circumstance is resolved, the crossing will be open at the regular intervals that it's been open, and the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza and the facilitation of foreign nationals interested in exiting will be able to do so.
Meanwhile, a convoy carrying emergency medical supplies and medicines have reached the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. It is the second delivery of vital aid to the hospital since the conflict between Hamas and Israel escalated. In a joint statement, the UN and World Health Organization said the quantity of supplies are far more sufficient to respond to the immense needs in the Gaza Strip. UNRWA and WHO again collected for fuel to be delivered in humanitarian agencies in the Gaza Strip. Italy on Wednesday sent a hospital ship close to the coast of Gaza to help treat victims of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Italian defense minister said the ship left the Italian port with 170 staff, including 30 people trained for medical emergencies. Italy is among the G7 foreign countries that urged for humanitarian pauses in the Israel-Hamas conflict in order to facilitate the entry of aid and the hostage-taking process. Also, France's President Emmanuel Macron will on Thursday host a conference on humanitarian aid for Gaza. Thursday's aid conference has been put together in a hurry on the sidelines of the annual Paris Peace Forum on November 10th and 11th. International concern over the fate of Gaza's civilians has strengthened calls for humanitarian pauses. Maritime corridor, floating hospitals and better aid coordination for Gazans are in focus at the Paris conference. The UN estimates that $1.2 billion in aid will be needed for the populations of Gaza and the West Bank from now until the end of the year. Well, on Wednesday, the Israeli Defense Forces said it was attacking infrastructure in Lebanon controlled by the Iranian-backed Hezbollah in response to rocket launches aimed at northern Israel in recent days. A video released by Israel's military showed several aerial shots of what it said were targets being hit near the Biranit area of northern Israel. On Friday, Hezbollah leader Nasrallah warned Washington that avoiding a regional war depends on stopping the Israeli offensive. Since 8th of October, Hezbollah has been exchanging fire with Israeli troops at the Lebanon border, the most significant escalation since a 2006 war. And members of international NGOs like Doctors Without Borders and Amnesty International were among the organizations that gathered near the Eiffel Tower in Paris on Wednesday to ask for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip to stop civilian suffering. The words "ceasefire now" were projected on wall with the Eiffel Tower as a backdrop. Doctors in Gaza have reported that patients arriving in the hospitals are exhibiting symptoms of diseases brought on by overcrowding and inadequate sanitation. Moving on, British Foreign Minister James Cleverly arrived in Saudi Arabia on Thursday to drive diplomatic efforts to find a resolution to the conflict in Gaza and southern Israel. Cleverly will meet with foreign ministers from the Middle East and will discuss efforts to prevent wider regional escalation, including in Lebanon and Yemen. He will also discuss initiatives to increase the volume of aid reaching civilians in besieged Gaza and ensure a pipeline of funds and supplies to support the relief effort. Also, Pentagon said that the United States conducted a second round of strikes against a weapons storage facility located in eastern Syria on Wednesday. The strikes came as tensions between the two countries continue to escalate, with at least 40 attacks on U.S. and coalition troops in both Iraq and Syria since the beginning of October. Since then, at least 45 U.S. troops have sustained traumatic brain injuries and other minor injuries. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said in a statement that the strikes, which were carried out by two F-15 fighter jets, were a response to recent attacks on American forces by Iranian proxies. Moving on, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken held a meeting with his South Korean counterpart on Thursday. The focus of bilateral talks shifted to the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The talks also focused on North Korea's growing military ties with Russia, as well as efforts to broker a humanitarian pause in the ongoing conflict. Following a meeting of G7 foreign ministers in Japan on Wednesday, Blinken traveled to South Korea on Thursday. At a news conference, he said the U.S. remains committed to the Indo-Pacific despite other global issues. This is Blinken's first visit to South Korea in 2.5 years. Meanwhile, speaking on the support that the United States has provided to Ukraine, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the country has gone through 96% of the funds that it allocated for Ukraine.
Of the total funds that have been provided to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, which is in excess of $60 billion, and that's not just security assistance, that's economic and financial assistance, humanitarian assistance. We've gone through about 96% of what's left, and greater than 90% of security assistance, replenishment funds, have been expended now.
A Russian missile damaged a Liberia-flagged civilian vessel entering a Black Sea port in Odessa region on Wednesday. The Ukrainian official said one person was killed, 3 crew members, citizens of the Philippines, and 1 port employee were injured in the attack. After pulling out of the UN-brokered deal that guaranteed safe shipments of Ukrainian grain via the Black Sea, Russia has been repeatedly attacking Ukrainian port infrastructure. The vessel was supposed to transport iron ore to China. An anti-mining protest that have roiled Panama for the last 2 weeks turned deadly, where a man allegedly shot and killed 2 demonstrators. 1 person has been arrested in connection with the deaths. The deaths came as thousands of Panamanians took to the streets over the past few weeks against a new mining deal signed with Canadian mining firm First Quantum Minerals. The new contract, agreed on 20th of October, was signed into law by Panama's government and provides a 20-year mining right with an option to extend for another 20 years in return for $375 million in annual revenue to Panama. Well, the president of military-ruled Myanmar, Mint Siew, told a National Defense and Security Council meeting on Thursday that the country was at risk of breaking apart due to ineffective mismanagement and recent violation in its border regions with China. The Myanmar junta is facing the biggest challenge to its authority since it gained power in the 2021 coup, with attacks by revolutionary and ethnic armed forces on hundreds of junta bases in the north, northeast, northwest and southeast of the country. In the northeast, the junta has lost control of some border trade towns with China. And a Malaysian lawmaker, Syed Saddiq Syed Abdul Rahman from a youth-based party, has been found guilty of corruption by the Kuala Lumpur High Court. As per the state news agency, Bernama Syed was found guilty on 4 charges of criminal breach of trust, misappropriation of property and money laundering. Syed Saddiq is a member of the Malaysian United Democratic Alliance. The alliance pulled support for Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's coalition in September, citing corruption concerns. Well, Eli Lilly's weight loss drug Zepbound gets US-UK approval to rival Novo Nordisk Wegovy. The 2 drugs are the most effective treatments for weight loss approved to date and will compete in a global market estimated to be worth $100 billion by the end of the decade. Drug makers have also been criticized for the high cost of the medicines that make it unaffordable for many who suffer from obesity. Zepbound will list at $1,059.87 a month, according to Lilly. That compares with a list of $1,349 per package for Novo Nordisk's widely popular weight loss drug, Wegovy. And the SAG-AFTRA union has reached a tentative agreement with the Hollywood studios to resolve the second of the 2 strikes that have rocked the entertainment industry since mid of July. The union says that the negotiators have reached a preliminary deal on a new contract with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, AMPTP, which represents Walt Disney, Netflix and other media companies. This breakthrough means that Hollywood can now ramp up to full production for the first time since May. Also, Shell has filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Greenpeace for activists boarding an oil production vessel and travelled on it as far as Norway. This action took place near the Canary Islands to protest oil drilling. Shell stated the actions were unlawful and dangerous. The lawsuit seeks $2.1 million in damages and Greenpeace's compliance with the Dutch court order. Greenpeace considers it one of the biggest legal threats in its history. Talks between the two parties have ended, with Greenpeace anticipating further action. And news from around the world now. A fire at a chemical distribution plant near Shepherd, Texas started after a forklift accident. The fire closed US Highway 59 between Shepherd and Livingston, Texas. Rural Texas communities have been frequent sites of chemical plant explosions and fires, including fertilizer storage facility explosions in 2013 and Hurricane Harvey. Residents were advised to shelter in homes and businesses as crews extinguished burning chemicals. Hundreds of migrants have blocked a highway in Chiapas, Mexico, demanding free transit permits for the journey through the country. A caravan of migrants from Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras and Venezuela, fleeing poverty and political instability, has arrived at the Cerro Gordo Customs Inspection Point, demanding documentation to reach the U.S. southern border. Thousands rallied on Wednesday outside Spanish Socialist Party headquarters in Madrid against proposed amnesty for those involved in Catalonia's independence bid. The amnesty law, a part of negotiations between the Socialist Party and Catalan separatist parties, has sparked widespread opposition and demonstration. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. 5th annual US-India 2+2 ministerial dialogue to be held on 10th of November in Delhi. The event to be attended by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Anniversary of the Kartarpur corridor between India and Pakistan today. Do or die for New Zealand as it takes on Sri Lanka in Bengaluru today in ICC World Cup.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such changemakers.
Watch Changemakers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Kuran. And moving on, US Democrats have scored significant victories in state elections, giving a big boost to US President Joe Biden. As expected, abortion access was a major issue in many of the races. Nick Harper reports for more from Washington.
It was an impressive night of victories for the Democrats. In Virginia, the party flipped the state house and retained the Senate. It's a rebuke to Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. He himself was not up for re-election, but he's been pushing hard to enact a 15-week abortion ban. With the Democrats now in control of the state legislature, that is not expected to happen. And therefore a blow to Youngkin, who's seen as a rising star in the Republican Party and a possible contender for the 2028 presidential election. In Kentucky, a deeply red Republican state, Democratic Governor Andy Beshear was re-elected. He ran on a platform that criticised his opponent's defence of the state's near-total ban on abortions. And in the state of Ohio, also a Republican stronghold, voters there enshrined abortion access into the state's constitution. That's a huge win for the pro-abortion Democratic campaigners. It shows that abortion access is a motivating factor for Democrat voters, an issue they're engaged with and willing to go to polling stations to help uphold. And it runs counter to the idea that the economy is the main issue at the top of voters' minds. It comes after the Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to abortions last summer. It could also augur well for the Democrats in next year's elections, showing that voter turnout among Democratic voters could be high if candidates run on abortion access. And these results could prove a useful boost for President Joe Biden, who's been struggling with approval ratings and is currently trailing Donald Trump in the polls in a theoretical 2024 presidential matchup. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
Well, as the 2024 U.S. presidential election approaches, Republicans went head-to-head for a crowded yet shrinking field of contenders to challenge U.S. President Biden. 5 candidates seeking to halt Donald Trump's march towards the 2024 Republican presidential nomination took part in the third debate on Wednesday. While former President Donald Trump, the front-runner, skipped this event for the third time. The candidates vented their frustration for a stinging series of election losses at the hands of Democrats. And the upcoming 5th annual US-India 2+2 ministerial dialogue in India's national capital, New Delhi, kickstarts on 10th of November. The event will be attended by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. A dialogue takes place amid ongoing international conflicts, Ukraine's Russia and Israel-Hamas, which has a bearing on strategic dynamics and a global outlook of both nations. We get you more.
India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Minister of External Affairs Dr. S. Jaishankar will welcome US Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken and Secretary of Defence Lloyd J. Austin III for the 5th India-US 2+2 ministerial dialogue in New Delhi on 10th November 2023. As per India's External Affairs Ministry, the 2+2 will enable a high-level review of progress being made in cross-cutting aspects of defence and security cooperation, technology value chain collaborations, and people-to-people ties. The 5th edition of 2+2 will deliberate upon India-US partnership as envisioned by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden in their discussions in June and September this year. Moreover, both sides will review regional issues and augmenting cooperation in multilateral platforms and frameworks such as the Quad. Recalling some critical deliverables in 4th India-US 2+2 ministerial dialogue held in April 2022, the discussions revolved around global partnership and Indo-Pacific cooperation, response to the worsening humanitarian crises in Ukraine, and assessing its broader implications, joint commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific, innovation and resilient supply chains, climate and clean energy besides global health. Both sides welcomed the expanding cooperation between the energy sectors, acknowledging the importance of deepening collaboration in science and technology in evolving new defense domains, space and artificial intelligence. Sakal Bhatt's report for DD India.
While speaking on the 5th India-US 2+2 ministerial dialogue, the principal deputy spokesperson of the US Department of State, Vedant Patel, said that the meet will focus on deepening security cooperation between the two countries, among many other issues.
India is a country that we have a deep partnership. This, of course, he'll be going for the 2+2 security dialogue with Secretary of Defense Austin. So I expect, of course, that deepening the security cooperation and partnership will be one of the many topics that are discussed. It was something that was obviously raised during Prime Minister Modi's state visit earlier this year. And I know the Secretary looks forward to being there and in engaging directly with his counterparts on this. But I'll let the trip take place before we talk more about it.
While addressing the media at the White House, National Security spokesperson John Kirby said that India is a key strategic partner to the US and are dedicated to further strengthen the ties between the two.
India is a key strategic partner, and I think you saw that on full display when Prime Minister Modi was here. But we'll leave it to the Indian government and the Prime Minister to decide what their stance is going to be on any particular crisis or contingency around the world, to include the Middle East. But they remain a key strategic partner, and we're dedicated to advancing that partnership every single day.
And moving forward to the direction to make healthcare services better, a memorandum of intent was signed between India and Netherlands at Hague. The MOI was signed to cooperate on medical product regulation and enhance the quality of medical products and healthcare services for both the countries. Signed during a meeting of Indian Union Minister Bhagwant Kuba and Dutch Minister Ernst Kuipers. Kuba was visiting Netherlands to participate in the second World Local Production Forum meeting. The World Local Production Platform is a platform created at the initiative of WHO with the aim of increasing access to medicines and other health technologies. Well, in the newly released QS Asia Universities Rankings 2024, India has surpassed China to become the most represented higher education system. The 2024 World University Ranking at Quarterly Siemens is out, and with 148 universities in the ranking list, India also becomes the country in Asia with the highest number of universities being featured, surpassing China with 133 and Japan with 96 universities. The Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, secured the top spot in India with the 40th position, followed by IIT Delhi at the 46th position and IIT Madras at the 53rd position. Well, 4 years ago on this day, the Kartarpur corridor between India and Pakistan was inaugurated, allowing devotees to visit the Gurudwara on the other side of the border. Founder of the Sikh faith, Guru Nanak Dev travelled through many countries, spreading the message of universal peace, harmony and love, before finally arriving in Kartarpur in 1521. Jessica Taneja has more.
The founder of Sikhism, Guru Nanak Dev, spent the last 18 years of his life here in Pakistan's Kartarpur district. This is the sacred ground where Guru Nanak Dev set up the first Sikh community, laid down the ethical principles, and handpicked the second Guru for the newly established religious faith. For more than 70 years, pilgrims could view Kartarpur Sahib only through a telescope lens. 4 years ago, an international human corridor was inaugurated, allowing Indian pilgrims to cross over into Pakistan visa-free.
9 नवंबर ही वो तारीख थी जब बर्लिन की दीवार गिरी थी। दो विपरीत धाराओं ने एकजुट होकर नया संकल्प लिया था। आज 9 नवंबर को करतारपुर साहिब कॉरिडोर की शुरुआत हुई है। इसमें भारत का भी सहयोग रहा है, पाकिस्तान का भी।
Despite decades of growing tensions between the two nations, this initiative sent out a message of peace, which would eventually lead to better ties in the future. Today, the Kartarpur Sahib corridor holds great significance, not just for Sikhs and Hindus, but also for Muslims who were equally devoted to Guru Nanak Dev. Jessica Taneja for DD India.
And Britain Prime Minister Rishi Sunak welcomed guests from the Hindu community and hosted a special Diwali event at 10 Downing Street ahead of the festival. He also wished everyone across the UK and around the world celebrating Diwali this weekend. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. India's President Draupadi Murmu attended the celebrations of 23rd Foundation Day of Uttarakhand. The main event was held in the civil lines and for the first time in 23 years. She also addressed the people in the parade ground. President Murmu is on a 3-day visit to the state, and today is the last day of her visit. Before the opening of Ram Lala Temple in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, the state government is set to hold the first cabinet meeting in the Ayodhya city. State's Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, along with his ministers, reached the city to chair the meeting. Before the meeting, all the cabinet members went to Ram Lala Pandal for darshan. Several important decisions on the development of the state and the city are expected. You're watching DD India News and time now for some sports news. With Australia having sealed a semi-final spot with an epic win on Tuesday night, the race is on to grab the fourth and the last remaining berth. New Zealand will emerge as the front-runner to win the Spirit if the side can post a victory over Sri Lanka at the M. Chinnaswamy Stadium on Thursday. This will take the Kiwis 2 points clear of the chasing pack, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Crucially, New Zealand holds the advantage with the best net run rate among the three teams, but the Kiwis, after starting the World Cup with 4 wins, have fallen out of track, losing their last 4 matches. On the other hand, Sri Lanka, who's out of the reckoning with pride. The defeat to Bangladesh a few days ago effectively ended hopes of progressing to the next stage. A win in the last league game will bring some positives to an otherwise poor Lankan campaign. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.